This is a confidential account drawn from real encounters. A story told in detail for you to listen, drift into mystery, and fall asleep. For 7 years, I flew experimental aircraft at a location that officially doesn't exist. I've kept this secret for long enough. It was March 15th, 2003, a Tuesday. I remember because Tuesdays were usually quiet on the base. The desert wind had been howling all day, kicking up sand that made everything look hazy and distant. I was scheduled for a routine flight test at 2,100 hours. But this wasn't going to be routine. Nothing at Groom Lake ever really was. Let me back up. I need to explain how I got there in the first place. I'd been a test pilot for the Air Force for 12 years before I got the call. I was 34 years old, stationed at Nellis Air Force Base, just outside Las Vegas. I flew F-16s mostly. Some F-15s when they needed someone with my clearance level. I was good at my job. Not the best, but solid, reliable. That's what they want, reliable. The recruitment process for Area 51 is nothing like you'd expect. They don't put out job postings. You don't apply. They find you. It started in January 2001. I was coming off a training run when my CO told me to report to his office. When I walked in, there were 2 men I'd never seen before, both wearing dark suits, both with the kind of bland, forgettable faces you'd never pick out of a lineup. They didn't introduce themselves, just asked me to sit down. The questions started simple. How long had I been flying? What was my family situation? Did I have debts? Then they got more pointed. Had I ever leaked classified information? Did I have friends or family in foreign countries? What were my political beliefs? I answered honestly because I had nothing to hide. After 40 minutes, they stood up, shook my hand, and left without explaining anything. 3 weeks later, it happened again. Different men, same questions. Then again, a month after that, I started to realize they were vetting me, testing my consistency, looking for cracks in my story. In June, my CO called me in again. This time, he was alone. He closed the door and sat down across from me. "Brennan," he said, "you've been selected for a special assignment. I can't tell you what it is or where it is. All I can say is that if you accept, your life is going to change. You'll be gone for extended periods. You won't be able to talk about your work. Not to me, not to your family, not to anyone." He slid a folder across the desk. "You have 72 hours to decide. If you say yes, sign the documents inside. If you say no, we never had this conversation." My wife, Jennifer, asked what it was. I told her it was just paperwork. That night, I sat at the kitchen table and read through page after page of legal jargon, non-disclosure agreements, and security protocols. The consequences for breaking the oath were spelled out in clinical detail: imprisonment, loss of pension, potential charges of treason. But nowhere in those documents did it say what I'd actually be doing. I signed anyway. 2 months later, I was on an unmarked white bus with blacked-out windows, heading north into the Nevada desert. There were 6 of us on that bus, all military, all pilots or engineers. Nobody spoke. We'd been instructed not to. The drive took about 90 minutes. When the bus finally stopped and the doors opened, I stepped out into the most desolate place I'd ever seen. Flat desert in every direction, mountains on the horizon, and a sprawling complex of buildings and hangars that shimmered in the heat. A sergeant met us at the gate. "Gentlemen, welcome to Groom Lake. From this moment forward, you do not exist. Your families believe you're on temporary assignment in Germany. Your friends believe you're deployed overseas. You will not correct them. You will not hint at the truth. You will not deviate from your cover story under any circumstances. Is that clear?" We all nodded. "Good. Follow me." They processed us like inmates, took our phones, our watches, our wallets, gave us ID badges with numbers instead of names, assigned us quarters in a dormitory that looked like it hadn't been updated since the 1960s. Everything was beige and institutional. No windows, no decorations, just beds, lockers, and fluorescent lights that buzzed constantly. That first night, I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, wondering what the hell I'd gotten myself into. The next morning, they put us through orientation, security protocols, emergency procedures, chain of command. Then they split us up. 3 of the guys went to work on propulsion systems. 2 went to avionics. I was assigned to flight testing. For the first 6 months, the work was classified, but not shocking. I flew modified F-117 Nighthawk stealth fighters with experimental radar-absorbing materials. I tested new engine configurations, ran performance diagnostics, logged hundreds of hours in aircraft that were advanced but still recognizably human-made. I started to relax. This was just another Air Force job, I told myself. Secret, sure, but nothing extraordinary. Then, in February 2002, everything changed. I was in the pilot's ready room, reviewing flight logs, when my commander walked in. Colonel Hackett, tall, gray-haired, with a face like carved granite. He'd been at Groom Lake for 15 years and had seen things that made him look perpetually tired. "Brennan," he said, "come with me." I followed him outside, across the tarmac, past the main hangars. We got into a Jeep and drove north. The road got rougher, less maintained. We passed 2 security checkpoints, each one more serious than the last. Armed guards, retinal scanners, the works. Finally, we stopped in front of a hangar that looked older than the others. Faded paint. Rust on the corners. A small sign that read S4218. Hackett turned to me. What I'm about to show you is compartmentalized beyond anything you've seen. You'll be read into a program called Cardinal Lake. You will not discuss this program with anyone outside of the team. Not the other pilots. Not the engineers you've been working with. If you break that rule, you'll spend the rest of your life in a federal prison. Do you understand? Yes, sir. He nodded and got out of the Jeep. Inside, the hangar was massive, easily twice the size of any other building on the base. Industrial lights hung from the ceiling, casting harsh shadows. A dozen technicians in white coats moved around equipment I didn't recognize. And in the center, under a circle of floodlights, sat the craft. I stopped walking. My brain couldn't process what I was seeing. It was roughly triangular, maybe 40 feet across at its widest point, with a smooth, seamless surface that looked like brushed pewter. No visible rivets, no panel lines, no seams or joints. Just one continuous piece of material that seemed to absorb the light around it rather than reflect it. There were no wings, no tail, no engine nacelles. Nothing that looked like it belonged on an aircraft. What? What is that? I heard myself say. A man in a lab coat approached. 50s, gray beard, German accent. Dr. Emil Strauss, he said, extending his hand. And that Pilot Brennan is what you're going to fly. I laughed. It was a reflex. Sir, I don't even see a cockpit. I don't see engines. I don't see you, Will, Strauss interrupted. Come, he led me closer. As we approached, I noticed details I'd missed from a distance. The surface wasn't perfectly smooth. There were faint, geometric patterns etched into it, too precise to be decorative. And the color wasn't quite metallic. It shifted slightly depending on the angle, like oil on water. Where did this come from? I asked. Strauss glanced at Colonel Hackett, who gave a slight nod. We didn't build it, Strauss said simply. We've been studying it since 1989, trying to understand how it works, trying to replicate the technology. We've made progress, but... He gestured at the craft. This is the original, and you're going to help us learn how to fly it properly. My mouth went dry. You're saying this is... I'm saying we didn't build it, Strauss repeated. That's all you need to know. Over the next 3 weeks, they trained me. Not in the craft itself, not yet, but in the theory. Strauss and his team of scientists sat me down in a windowless conference room and walked me through concepts that made my head spin. The propulsion system didn't use combustion or jet engines. Instead, it manipulated something Strauss called localized gravitational fields. He showed me diagrams and equations that might as well have been ancient Greek. The craft could create a bubble of altered space-time around itself, essentially falling in whatever direction it wanted to go. Gravity isn't a force you fight, Strauss explained. It's a field you manipulate. This craft bends that field. It doesn't push against the air or expel thrust. It simply ... moves. I asked how it was powered. Strauss hesitated. We don't know, he admitted. There's an energy source inside the hull, but we can't access it. We've tried cutting into it, drilling into it, scanning it with every piece of equipment we have. Nothing works. The hull is impervious. Whatever material this thing is made from, it's beyond our current understanding. So how do we fuel it? We don't. It doesn't need fuel. As far as we can tell, it draws energy from ... somewhere else. A zero-point field, maybe. Quantum vacuum fluctuations. We have theories, but no proof. I sat back in my chair, trying to absorb this. And you want me to fly this thing? Yes. Why me? Strauss smiled thinly. Because you're calm under pressure. Because you follow orders. And because, frankly, you're expendable. If this goes wrong, the program continues. If it goes right, we learn something invaluable. I didn't know whether to be honored or terrified. On March 1st, 2002, they finally let me inside. There was no door. Strauss walked up to the hull and placed his hand on a specific spot. The surface rippled like water and a section peeled back, revealing a small opening. Climb in, he said. I hesitated, then ducked through the opening. Inside was a cramped space, barely large enough for one person. The walls were the same seamless material as the exterior, but they glowed faintly with a soft blue light. In the center was a seat. You could call it that. It looked organic, almost like bone, molded into a shape that suggested a human form. Sit, Strauss instructed from outside. I lowered myself into the seat. The moment my back touched it, the material shifted. It molded itself to my body, cradling me perfectly. It wasn't uncomfortable, but it was deeply unsettling. Now place your hands on the armrests. I did. The surface was warm, almost alive, and then I felt it. A presence, not a voice, not a thought, but an awareness. The craft knew I was there. It was ... waiting. Relax, Strauss said over a radio I suddenly realized was built into my helmet. Don't fight it. Let it read you, read me. The craft interfaces directly with the pilot's nervous system. It interprets your intentions and translates them into movement. Think of it as an extension of your body. I took a deep breath. Okay, what do I do? Think about lifting off. Just the thought. Don't force it. Don't overthink it. Just ... Intend it. I closed my eyes. I imagined the craft rising, slowly, gently, and it did. I felt no acceleration, no vibration, no sound. But when I opened my eyes, I was 6 feet off the hangar floor, hovering in complete silence. My heart was pounding. My hands were shaking. But the craft held steady, perfectly balanced, waiting for my next command. "Good," Strauss said. His voice was calm, almost bored. "Now set it down." I thought about descending. The craft obeyed instantly, touching down so gently I barely felt it. How is this possible?" I whispered. "That," Strauss said, "is what we're trying to figure out." Over the next 14 months, I flew that craft more than 40 times. Each flight pushed the boundaries further. The first few flights were simple hovering, slow movement inside the hangar, basic maneuvers. But the craft was patient. It learned me as much as I learned it. By my 10th flight, I was taking it outside. We'd cleared a restricted area 20 miles north of the main base, a flat stretch of desert where radar was jammed and satellite coverage was blocked. I'd launch just after sunset when the sky was dark enough to hide the craft's faint glow. The flight characteristics were unlike anything I'd ever experienced. The craft could accelerate from a dead stop to Mach to in under 3 seconds without any G-force. I should have been crushed by that acceleration, but I felt nothing. The craft somehow compensated, creating an internal environment where physics didn't apply the same way. It could turn on a dime literally. I could be flying north at 800 miles per hour. Think about going east, and the craft would pivot 90 degrees instantaneously. No banking, no arc, just an immediate change in direction, and it was silent. Completely, utterly silent. During one flight, I took it up to 80,000 feet. At that altitude, the sky turns a deep purple, almost black, and you can see the curvature of the earth. I hovered there, suspended in something I didn't understand, looking down at the planet, and felt more alone than I'd ever felt in my life. I radioed back to base. "Tower, Brennan. I'm at Angels 80. Everything is stable." There was a pause. Then Strauss's voice. "How do you feel?" "Terrified," I said honestly, "and amazed." "Good. That means you're paying attention." But the real test came on my 23rd flight. June 12, 2002. They wanted to push the speed envelope. See how fast the craft could actually go. We'd plotted a course over the restricted range, a straight line, 200 miles long, completely empty desert. I launched at dusk, climbed to 50,000 feet, leveled off. "Brennan," Strauss radioed, "when you're ready, we want you to accelerate to maximum velocity. Don't hold back. Let's see what this thing can do." I took a breath. Then I thought about speed, about moving as fast as possible. The craft responded instantly. The desert below became a blur. The horizon rushed toward me and vanished. I glanced at the rudimentary speed indicator we'd installed, a small device strapped to my wrist that used GPS and inertial sensors. Mach 3, Mach 5, Mach 8. The numbers climbed impossibly fast. 12. I wasn't breathing. I was just holding on, mentally, as the craft tore across the sky faster than anything human-made had ever flown. Then, just as suddenly, I thought about stopping. The craft halted instantly, from Mach 12 to 0 in less than a second. I should have been dead. The deceleration alone should have liquefied my internal organs. But I felt nothing, just a gentle sense of stillness. "Tower," I said, my voice shaking. I just went from Mach 12 to 0 in under a second. Silence on the radio. Then, "Say again." I stopped instantly from Mach 12, and "I'm fine." More silence. Then Strauss's voice, quieter than usual, returned to base. "Brennan, we need to debrief." That's when I started to realize how far beyond our understanding this technology really was. But it was my final flight, October 28th, 2003, that changed everything. They'd scheduled a night exercise, full stealth profile over the restricted range. I was supposed to fly a pattern, evade simulated radar tracking, and return to base. By that point, I'd logged over 60 hours in the craft. I was comfortable, confident. I launched at 2,200 hours. The desert was pitch black below me, broken only by the faint glow of distant towns on the horizon. I climbed to 60,000 feet and began the pattern. That's when I saw them. 3 lights. Bright white, moving in perfect formation, about 10 miles to my east. They were at roughly my altitude, maybe slightly higher at first. I thought they were other aircraft, maybe F-22s, running a parallel exercise. But they were moving too smoothly, too fast. I radioed the control tower. "Groom Tower, Brennan, I have visual on 3 unidentified craft, bearing 090, range 10 miles. Can you confirm traffic?" There was a long pause, longer than it should have been. Then, "Negative, Brennan. We show no traffic in your vicinity. Your scope is clear." But I could see them, clear as anything. I watched as the 3 lights broke formation. They moved independently, each executing maneuvers that would have torn apart any conventional aircraft. Sharp turns, instantaneous acceleration. Then, in perfect synchronization, all 3 shot straight up, not climbed. Shot up, like someone had fired them from a cannon. In less than 5 seconds, they were gone, vanished into the black sky above me. My hands were gripping the armrests so hard they hurt. "Tower," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "Did you see that?" Another pause. This one even longer. "Brennan, return to base immediately. Maintain radio silence. Do not discuss this flight with anyone. Acknowledge." Acknowledged. I flew back in complete silence. My mind was racing. What had I just seen? Were those other craft like mine? More advanced prototypes, or something else entirely? When I landed, 2 security officers were waiting on the tarmac. They didn't say a word, just gestured for me to follow them. They took me to a building I'd never been in before. Low concrete structure on the far side of the base. Inside was a single room with a metal desk, 2 chairs, and no windows. A man was sitting behind the desk. I'd never seen him before. No uniform, no name tag, just a dark suit and the kind of face you'd forget 5 minutes after meeting him. "Sit down, Pilot Brennan," he said. I sat. He opened a folder and glanced at it briefly. "You experienced a sensor malfunction during your flight tonight. Your instruments displayed false returns due to atmospheric interference. This is not uncommon at high altitudes in this region. Do you understand?" I stared at him. "Sir, I didn't see those lights on instruments. I saw them with my own eyes." "You experienced a sensor malfunction," he repeated, his voice completely flat. "That is what happened. That is what you will report. That is what you will remember. But Pilot Brennan," he leaned forward slightly, "you have done exceptional work here. Your service has been invaluable. But there are things above your clearance level, things you are not equipped to understand. For your own safety and for the security of this program, you will accept the official explanation. Is that clear?" I wanted to argue. I wanted to demand answers. But something in his eyes stopped me. This wasn't a conversation. It was an order disguised as one. "Yes, sir," I said quietly. He closed the folder. "Your rotation here is ending. You'll be reassigned to Nellis next month. You've served honorably. Go home. Forget what you think you saw tonight." He stood up and left without another word. I sat there alone in that room for 10 minutes, trying to process what had just happened. They weren't denying the lights existed. They were telling me to pretend they didn't. That was the last time I flew the craft. The last time I set foot in Hangar 18. They kept me on base for another 3 weeks, doing paperwork and administrative debriefs, but I was never allowed near the flight line again. On November 20th, 2003, I boarded the bus back to Nellis. I walked into my house and hugged my wife, who had no idea where I'd really been, or what I'd really been doing. I went back to flying F-16s. I retired from the Air Force in 2009. I tried to build a normal life, but I never forgot. I never forgot the craft that defied every law of physics, the technology that shouldn't exist. The lights I saw that night, moving in ways that no human-made aircraft ever could. They told me to forget. They told me it was a malfunction. But you don't forget something like that. You can't. I don't know where that craft came from. I don't know who built it. But I know what I flew. I know what I saw. And I know with absolute certainty that we are not alone. My name is Ryan Brennan. I flew something at Area 51 that shouldn't exist. And on my last flight, I saw proof that there's something else out there. Something we're not being told about. That's my story. That's the truth. And I'm finally done keeping it to myself.